Hi, I'm Randy MacLean, the president of Waypoint Analytics, and I have Jeanne Hurlbert from Hurlbert Consulting Group with us today. Jeanne and I have been doing a lot of work on various projects across the years, and she's doing some extraordinary things for some of our clients right now in helping them develop the concierge customer service piece that is so important for the 2016 and 2020 strategies. So, Jeanne, one of the things that is very, very interesting to me is your discussion about the referability and more importantly, doing some survey work and doing other works like other kinds of things to track how things are going on in the market. And quite honestly, you taught me some very important lessons in this over the last few years. And so one of the things is that you will always be successful and you will have a much easier time retaining your accounts if you do a good job for them and they know it.
Right.
Because it never occurred to me that they might not know that we were doing so well. And that is something that I think is vital for every business. So could you go into a little bit more detail and share what that really means?
Well, there are kind of two elements to this piece of this. So people come to me and they say, where do we start to put concierge customer service in place?
Yes.
You start with your customers. Okay, and you start with your customers in two cents. The first thing you want is use what we call our opportunity generator to find out what their biggest problems, their biggest concerns are, what keeps them awake at night, and what do they want? What are their expectations around customer service? It sounds so basic, but most companies cannot answer those questions. They don't know.
I'm sure they can answer them, just not accurately.
Not
So
accurately.
Your point.
You know, they may have some anecdotal data, but what they think they know is generally not reality.
Or dated.
And when we get systematic data, we've never delivered those data without delivering surprises, no matter how good the relationship was between the company and the customers.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that gives you this amazing picture then of what you need to do to build your customer service system. Okay,
Yes.
and you want good customer service for everybody, and you want extraordinary customer service of your top customers. And you use that out of this, but you're going to get feedback from everybody because you want to hear from everybody.
Right.
Okay?
And that's a good point. Nobody can afford to give concierge service to every client, every customer.
Right.
If they did, then there's no way to be profitable.
That's right.
So what you're really trying to do is reward and look after the customers that really are the core of your profit generation. So, and I think that's an important point. Now, you're talking about going out to the customer and finding out what needs and wants and what the opportunities are. And you mentioned the opportunity generator in terms of having a systemic approach to recognizing and collating the information that's guiding you into the things that are going to make the most difference for most of your customers. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. And so when I understand what their biggest concerns are, you know, are their biggest concerns that their customers can't pay them well, or their biggest concerns that they can't attract new customers, you know, what are the thorny points for these particular people, then I have gold, because I know how to angle all of my marketing. I know how to create content, and I know what needs to go in that customer service system because I'm going to hit that too. So we start with them and who they are and what they want, and then we put that customer service system in place.
Yeah.
And then once we do, we've got to get feedback all the time to make sure it works, to make sure we continually hit the mark.
Now that's an interesting point, and I don't want to distract us, but you mentioned the word content a few times. And I think that a lot of the people that we work with might not recognize what you mean by content.
Okay, so creating content, posts that you can put on LinkedIn, things that you can put in a trade magazine, things that you can put out that you can offer to your customers on YouTube, on Facebook, depending upon what your clientele is. So you're giving them content that'll help them solve the problems.
Yeah,
right?
I guess the most obvious example to anybody watching is we're creating content right now.
We're creating content right now, just like this.
Yeah.
And so I can only target that content in a way I know they'll want to consume it if I know what their problems are. So if the content needs to be oriented around, okay, here's some tips on how you can solve this problem, I've got to understand those problems.
Right.
Once I have that list, once I know what their top problems are, it's easy. Because now I can create 5 videos in a series that show them how to solve their top 5 problems.
Right.
You know, I can create Facebook posts and LinkedIn posts out of that. There's so many companies out there that don't create content because they don't know what to create. This solves that problem for you.
I would say there's a lot of companies out there that don't even know that they should be creating.
Well, there's that too.
So
there's that too.
And I know that you know, I've been in business for many years. And in the early days, there were still order books out there. Fax machines were an innovation when I first started selling. And so I think that my track, my learning path on this, and you've been a part of that, thank you very much, has been that I had to come to the realization that people, particularly in the millennial generation, the younger people, communicate in different ways. Video content is by far one of the most effective ways that you can create knowledge and share techniques and information that people can easily absorb. Rather than spending a couple hours reading a chapter on one of my books, they can spend 15 minutes watching a video and get some really great insights into the kinds of things that are going on in the outside world and can act on them. And the incoming generation, that's how they learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a very effective way to reach and communicate with people that are a generation or maybe 2 generations behind myself, who will be the leaders and owners of the companies in the future.
So the point is that when you find out what their problems are and what they want in customer service, you know how to put that customer service system in place, but you're going to garner all these side benefits that are also very profitable.
Mm-hmm. So that's good. So one of the things that I really wanted to hone in on, and I mentioned before, you have to be doing a good job, and if you're doing a good job for your customers and they know you're doing a good job, then that actually drives loyalty. And we talked about one of the tactics that you have on your program, where whenever there's a problem that gets solved by somebody in the concierge department, they're basically writing or sending or phoning a report back saying, I solved the problem. And the more sophisticated operators are putting together weekly and monthly reports, so that the customer knows, this month there was 3 different times when you had this certain problems. We had them all solved within an hour, within 2 hours, that kind of thing.
Right.
And by the way, if there's anything we didn't solve, will you please tell us about it or give us a chance to make it right? And it gives you another opportunity to have contact with the customers.
Absolutely.
So when I'm watching as you're bringing some of our accounts along, I'm constantly amazed at the things that are going on that are taking that whole relationship to a higher level. Mm-hmm. All right, so the other part, or the part that I was getting at, though, outside of talking with your customers, is an awful lot that can be fed back into your marketing.
Absolutely.
And so I thought that was particularly interesting. So why is that important?
Well, it's important because when you've got proof that you can serve customers well, that you're giving them what they want, that they're satisfied or they're extraordinarily satisfied, that's really, really powerful. Mm-hmm. And many companies have a few testimonials. Most companies don't have much more than that.
Oh, yes.
And so what we want to do is we basically want to get several different kinds of social proof. We want to get testimonials. We want to have data saying 98% are satisfied and 95% would recommend us. And we can put the data and the stories and the testimonials together. We have something extraordinarily powerful. Yeah. So if we're constantly keeping the pulse on customer sentiment and getting those data and with a system that just runs on its own, then we're getting this rocket fuel for marketing all the time that most of your competitors won't have.
Yeah, and I have to say that as a recipient of that and the work that you've done for my company, and getting those numbers where you're talking about who would be likely to refer you and what they think of your service performance, and getting numbers back in the high 90s is really, really rewarding. But it's also something that we can feed back into our marketing so that people will be more assured. One of the other things that you've done for us is that you've gathered some great testimonial statements from accounts, and those work really well in our marketing because we have a credible statement from an actual account or client speaking to another potential client without us necessarily being in the middle. Like we're a vehicle to make sure that they get to see it, but it's not us saying how great we are, it's somebody else saying that we're pretty good.
Yeah, so testimonials are the stories that stick, that come directly from your customers.
Yes.
Okay, and then the data are irrefutable. They make sure that people will believe those testimonials.
Right.
When you can put those two things together, it's really powerful. Yeah. So we had a war between an insurance company and a hospital in the city where I live. Mm-hmm. Okay, the insurance company ran 2 commercials back to back. The first one was a woman giving a heart-rending story of how her daughter was near death, and the insurance company provided the money for her life-saving care, and she survived. Second one, juxtaposed right against it, was, did you know that 50 cents of every dollar that we pay to this hospital goes for something other than patient care? So the first one appealed to your emotions, and the second one appealed to your logic.
Right.
And they got it right. They knew exactly how powerful that was.
Yeah, yeah, that's terrific. Okay, so the takeaway here is that working on the referability, making sure that you're getting that information and feedback in your marketing. Now, I had one last question I want to ask you before I let you go, and that is, what's the biggest mistake that companies make in trying to gather information from their customers for these kinds of purposes?
The biggest mistake is not being systematic. So they'll throw a few questions together or use the Net Promoter Score or something like that. They'll do it once a year, maybe, and they're not really very systematic in the kinds of questions they ask. They don't give people incentives to do it, and they'll send out invitations with things like, do us a favor. The whole thing needs to be framed in terms of doing the customer a favor. It needs to be all benefits for them, and so that they don't build a system, they don't do it systematically, they don't reward the customer.
Yeah.
And so that's what, because you shouldn't have to worry about it. You should be able to build a system that runs.
Well, the systemic thing I think is vital, because in the old days, it's expensive. You run a survey, you do that, you get a result, and everybody would be saying, okay, and what are we going to do next? But the market changes so quickly now that I like the idea that you're basically on a continual, ongoing survey all the time, so that you can see how attitudes are changing, how the market is changing, how the things that are value are changing. And you're not working to what they used to want, you're looking at what they want today and are likely to want tomorrow. And
that doesn't mean you survey them every time they buy a widget,
but
it means that you, every 6 or 9 months, you're touching that customer. And with autoresponders now, it's easy to set systems up to make it work well.
Oh, that's terrific. Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing this insight. I hope this is something that will be useful to you. I hope that you get some ideas of the things we've discussed and get a better insight, and maybe apply it to some of the things you may already be doing, and you can make them better, or maybe start to institute some of these things in your process. And of course, Jeanne, you're always available to answer questions to people that are interested in this topic. And I can speak from experience that Jeanne was very, very liberal with the amount of things that she was going to share with us early on in the process, so that we could get our feet wet. And then in the end, she came and did quite a lot of good work for us, so we're very pleased with that as well. So I hope this is good for you, and I hope it's interesting for you as has been for me. I always learn a great deal in having these discussions. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you do with it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in future videos. Thanks, Jeanne.
Thanks, Randy.